All right, we'll go into this Q&A. Again, want to welcome to this Q&A. Question came up, or whatever, it's come up before, that whatever, I want to address one thing in general, just about prayer. Prayer is a hard thing, because of the language. Someone's not used to, the Hebrew language. I'm not even talking about intention or Kabbalistic intention or, anything like that. But language is a problem, when to stand, when to sit, when to bow, right? All these different things, also, issues until, a person learns, how you're supposed to pray, whatever. And it is one of the three things that always needs, to be strengthened. So it's not something that's going to be easy, right? So, I come in contact with a lot of people that, there's a lot of, definitely a lot of frustration. Because, they'll go to synagogue and they'll see people sit, stand, whatever, and like they're lost, right? So now, let's say, they've come out of idolatry, Christianity, whatever it may be, and now they come to the truth and, they go to a synagogue and like, they're lost. So, first of all, that's a normal thing. Second of all, it does take time, to get used to. So a person has to, give themselves, a little bit of slack, because whatever, it's going to take time, right? It's going to take time, to get used to. It's going to get time to, quote unquote, understand the lingo, right? What I'm supposed to be doing, and all that. The question, always obviously comes up, and that is that we say the same prayers, right? Every day, right? They're the same prayers. Sometimes we add things, we take out things, Shabbos, there's a lot more prayers, different prayers. So again, this takes time, this takes time to get used to, this time, takes time, to, basically understand, at a basic level, not even talking, anything else, just at a basic level, what a person's doing and what, and really the power of, what it is. And the reason is, a person will say, well, I prayed for this, I prayed for that. Let's say it's something, a person needs, and God knows you need it. Okay. For whatever reason, he doesn't give it, right? Doesn't want to give it, he doesn't give it, whatever reason. Yeah. So what does the person do? So the person gets frustrated. They're going to say, God is all knowing and God is caring. Why does he help me? What do I feel I get rejected? Why do I feel I do other things? It's worse. Prayer is not a, the first mistake is that a person shouldn't think, prayer is instantaneous. Even if you prayed well. See, it's one of the worst things the Gemara says. One of the worst things that a person can say is that they prayed well. Yeah. In other words, God's going to scrutinize it, right? God is going to scrutinize it. In other words, if a person says, one day, I mean, I'm not going to say it on a regular basis, most likely, but a person says, God's going to give me what I need. I prayed so well today. I had such intentions. One of the worst things a person can say. And the reason is, even if you prayed with a congregation with 10 men, doesn't matter. The fact is, when a person says, I did this well, God's going to scrutinize. Even if you prayed with a congregation, we've mentioned before that if you pray with a congregation, and even if a person sins, and maybe there are many sinners there, I mean, everybody does sin, right? So there's more power when it comes to a congregation than praying on your own. A woman has less of an obligation to pray with the congregation, but still there's power of the congregation. Yeah. So one problem is the person may think, okay, I had this intention. I didn't lose focus. Why don't I get what I want? Now we petition the Shemona Esrei, silent meditation, whatever you want to call it. We petition for all kinds of things. We petition for health. We petition for livelihood. We petition for knowledge, for spiritual knowledge, right? Many things, many things that we petition for. And again, for argument's sake, let's say these are all things we need. Very good, right? So why don't I get it? What's the problem? Yeah, why shouldn't God want to, like, we say by the blessing of livelihood and Baruch Aleinu, we pray that, it should be a good crop. Good crop means that livelihood. But praying for something in abundance doesn't necessarily mean it's good, right? You got to keep that in mind. So what in general should we have in mind when we pray that God gives us exactly what we need? That's the general thing. But where people get caught up also is they want to say spontaneous prayer. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that, right? But again, prayer is fixed for a reason, right? It's fixed for a reason. The rabbis, prophets knew what they were doing, right? When they fixed the prayers. Now, again, I'm a relatively simple person. People 10 times greater than me and people that are prophets are going to tell you what to say. That's what you say, right? That's what you say on a regular basis. I understand it more, I understand it less. It's something, something, certainly for a guy, all you, Jewish wannabe guys out there, right? Or Jewish guy wannabes, let's say, wannabes meaning to be a Jew, that, there's an obligation 3 times a day. Some people, I would say, more into it, less into it, but it shouldn't be done in a way where a person just like, I'm fulfilling my obligation, I'm going home. Right? In other words, you have a golden opportunity. And someone said, by what's going on here, in Israel, that they live outside of Israel, and they were saying, all I can do, I can't really do much. I don't live there. Okay, but all I can do is pray. Yeah, all you can do is pray. Okay, but don't you know how potent prayer is? In other words, if you're going to say, well, I can't do anything more, that's plenty. If you understood the power of prayer and you understood what it can do. I'm not talking about Kabbalah, right? Prayer has power. Doesn't mean we always get what we want. It doesn't mean it's instantaneous. And even a person didn't get what they want today, still wanting to pray for it tomorrow. It's something you don't give up on, because at the end of the day, it's you and God in the world. God is the big X factor. Whatever we do, God's in charge. That's what we got to remember. That's the most important thing. Success or failure, obviously, can be based on what we do, for sure, right? But at the end of the day, who's calling the shots? Not us. We think we are in some ways. We think, if I say this or I do that, or, person goes for a job interview, they, think, they're so qualified, this and that. Let's say they don't get the job. Yeah. Some person may be devastated. Oh, it was a dream job. It was this, it was that. Yeah. But they got something else. They found something else. And maybe they find out later the job wasn't so good. Whatever it may be. See, that's also the problem. What we see, we don't understand. What we think is good may turn out bad. What we think is bad may turn out good. Right? But I've seen many times, other people's stories also, that when doors get closed and sometimes slammed shut, there are other doors that open. It may take time. It might be pain going through it, whatever it is, but doors definitely open. There's no such thing as a person is ever stuck. Right? Things may not go our way. We may have to plan to do things in a certain way, whatever it is. Right? But there's a major, major X factor. So the fact is, I have to develop my connection. I have to work on my connection. It's not just about saying the words. Saying the words is one thing. But I mean, if a person wanted to, which I think is a good idea if you have time, is when you look at the prayers in general, whether you say according to Sephardic tradition, Ashkenazi tradition, doesn't matter. right? When you look at where they come from, where the sources are in Tanakh, look them up. Look up the verses. See what they say. See what the background is, right? See what's going on. I mean, I think some things are very obvious. They wouldn't necessarily have to do that, right? But it's good, to get context. Yeah. If you look at the Haggadah, right? Haggadah is a good example. The Haggadah of Passover. And you have the four sons, right? You have a wise son, a wicked son. One does not ask, and a simple son, right? Now, the questions that they ask, there are verses there that are quoted. So if you look up the verses and you see the context, right? Then what do I have? Could have questions. You definitely could have questions here. This means this. Why is it being used in this context? I mean, probably, outside of the Torah itself and Tanakh, probably the most written book on, and in Jewish history, right? Which is the Haggadah. We don't even know really who wrote the Haggadah. Somebody in time of the Second Temple, right, or the First Temple period. It was one of the rabbis for sure. We just don't. We're not really sure who it is, but it's just interesting that even though we don't really know who the author is, there are hundreds, thousands of commentaries, on the Haggadah. Yeah, thousands. Most written book about. Any case, I don't want to digress, but if a person looks at what's being said, right, then you got to think, okay, what's the context? What am I supposed to get out of it? What should I be thinking? Now, again, even when a person's in the middle of prayer, right? Always good to have a good translation as well, right? Understand what you're saying. But think for a split second, not, you got to keep pace if you pray with the congregation, whatever, think about what the words mean. Think about what you're saying. Again, it has nothing to do with Kabbalistic intention. Zero. As for everyone, about Shmon Esrei, silent meditation, 19 blessings, whatever you want to call it. So I said, what should my, intention be when I say it? So he said, the Chofetz Chaim says, Perish Amilos, understand the words, right? Understand the words. So I said, and he goes, for you, that's enough. Just understand the words. Understand, what you're saying and what the context is. Just understand. Now, again, you can think about every word, and concentrate. It can take you hours to say, okay, we don't have hours. Most people don't have that much time. It's okay, how long is it going to take? If someone, really knows how to read Hebrew, it could take 3 minutes, it could take 4 minutes. Some people might take 10 minutes, whatever it may be. But think, it's very easy, by the way, when you see we're praising God for all kinds of things, that, there are things we understand. Thank God for the sun. If we didn't have sun, we'd all die. Thank God for rain. Right? Thank Him for all kinds of things. Yeah, but the problem is sometimes we just don't realize what we have until we don't have it. Imagine you live in a place there's a drought. There is no rain, right? Or, in Israel, you always need rain. Summer, you never get rain. So you need a lot of rain during the winter. And there are times there have been droughts. A number of years there were droughts. They pump a lot of water out of the Sea of Galilee. So what they did is they kept, there's a red line, until the Galilee is filled to the top. So when it gets to a certain point, you can't pump water out of there anymore. Right? It becomes dangerous to do such a thing. Dangerous, unhealthy, do such a thing. I remember, over the years, there's one point where there's 2-3 winters. I was very, very mild. Very, very mild, very little rain. And they almost got to a point where, they were even thinking about bringing in water from Turkey. Right? I mean, that's how desperate they got. Now they got the salination plant, so it makes it a little bit easier. Okay. But at some point, you don't get rain. Dangerous in many ways. So many things, people say, well, walking in the rain and it's cold and this, like, you get a real rainy winter here, day in and day out, it's raining, not all the time, but you're wet because a lot of people, a lot of people are outside, you're waiting for buses, this and that, you get wet, right? That, I always tell people you have to learn how to walk between the drops, like, you're soaking wet. I said, I didn't say I knew how to do it, right? But person should whistle and Dixie when it rains. We need the rain. We need the rain in specific places also, right? So, when one thing is, you go through, most of the prayers, even quickly, just to understand what they're about, right? So, you look things up, you see what it means, whatever. It's not a hard thing to appreciate, right? But the thing is, the person will say, I feel like I'm praying to a wall, right? That means we're not living with God, right? This is a serious thing because maybe we don't believe God's in charge. And he can change things. We say, Yeshua Hashem Karafai, the salvation of God can come with the blink of an eyelash. Literally. It can come from somewhere where you absolutely least expect it. And that's normally what happens. You might think salvation is going to come from here. It's going to come from there. And guess what? It comes from a place you never thought of. If it was a scale of 1 to 10, like what are the odds it's going to come for this, from this place, whatever the salvation is, probably like 250,000, like, or whatever it is. Like you never thought it would come from that, right? And that's most likely that's what happens, right? A lot of times we think, oh, this is going to happen or that's going to happen, the other thing's going to happen, and like, not only doesn't it happen, but it's where you least, where you least expect it. So a lot of times people think, or let's say better, people have difficulty with this because prayer is hard, in the context of what's being said and saying the same thing, isn't it better, to say fewer things with more intention? Very good. Yeah. People have made that claim. Well, there are basic things you obviously have to say. You can't just, like go in the forest and pray. I mean, you could, but you still have formal prayer. We've spoken about that. So again, it's something that, can be very frustrating, can be very invigorating also, but, it can be very frustrating if you don't know the lingo, you don't know the language, and, everything else, that goes with it. All right. Somebody asks, what can I use instead of a mikvah? Obviously can't pray from state of nida. So who says? Who says that's true? A woman who gets a period, she can't pray. Why? Why can't she pray? There's a question, can she go to synagogue? That there's okay, might be a question, right? But we hold, practically speaking, a woman can't. She can go to synagogue even when she has the period, right? So what's the problem? So, a Jewish woman will be with her spouse, okay, so you have to go to proper mikvah. If there's no proper mikvah, you go to the ocean or wherever, right? But in general, that would be the only time you would have to go. You would have to go to the mikvah. Yeah. Now to pray, who says you have to go to the mikvah? Right? A person, a guy has seminal emission. Let's say through a relation. So there's a decree that you should go to the mikvah afterwards. Now, question is, first of all, do most people do it? Probably not. It's kind of inconvenient in different ways. But if you have an obligation, you have an obligation, right? Some do it. Some do it, but I don't think it's practiced by most people. And whatever, different reasons, different reasons why. But there is a question. If a person, took a shower, let's say, that may fulfill your obligation that way, to be able to, for a guy to be able to learn, let's say, or pray, or maybe put on tefillin, maybe, right? That would take care of the problem. Others say you don't have to do that, right? Maybe these other things don't apply, but certainly for a woman to go to the mikvah, it's not, a woman to go to, what's it called? woman to go to synagogue, even if she has a period, okay, that might be a question. But to pray in general, why would it be forbidden? Even if she's in a state of impurity, so what? Who says you can't pray? Right? Who says you have to purify yourself to do it? Again, by a guy might be different. You have a seminal emission. Okay. Yeah. So there is what to be said to go to the mikveh before you pray and learn and all that. There is what to be said for that. Most people don't do it, right? Not practice today in general. But a woman, what's the problem? She doesn't have to wait 2 weeks to pray, so she go to the mikveh, right? And going to the mikveh while she's still bleeding doesn't help, right? That doesn't help. If she stops bleeding, doesn't help in that sense. It doesn't matter though. It doesn't matter. She doesn't need to, right? Absolutely doesn't need to. But a person in general, even if you didn't go to the mikveh, yeah, if a guy or a woman, doesn't matter. Aren't we in a state of impurity anyway? So you say, well, if I go to the mikveh, if a guy goes to the mikveh, Hasidim in general, go to the mikveh every day. Why? Not just because of seminal emission. They go for extra holiness. Very good. And if they didn't, they can't pray. Who says they can't pray? Why can't they pray? It's an extra level of holiness. Very good. Right? So we're in a state of impurity. So even if a woman didn't get her period, she's still in a state of impurity. Right? We're all in a state of impurity. On a Torah level. It's just that going to the mikveh helps take this impurity off. But there are, person, has ever been to a funeral. That level of impurity you don't get off. That's the highest level of impurity we have. It's coming in contact with dead body. Yeah, there's nothing to take that away, that impurity. You can go to the mikveh, stay there for a month, doesn't matter. Right? Stay with the snorkel, rubber ducky, whatever. It's not gonna help. Doesn't take off that level of impurity. Right? So it's an interesting question. One wants to be intimate with her husband, she goes to the mikveh. Why a mikveh takes away that impurity? Yeah. Why that should work? On a Torah level, it won't work. For other impurity, it will not work. Yeah, for this it does. Doesn't matter. It works. Right? It's a question, it's a question we're always in a state of impurity anyway. Right? But that, even if a guy had a seminal emission, yeah. Yeah, or came in contact, I'd say better. Came in contact with dead body. He can stay in the mikveh as long as he wants. You take off that impurity, purity still sticks there. Doesn't get rid of it. Right? Now, does that mean that if you don't get rid of that impurity, you can't pray? No. Doesn't mean that. Somebody asks, so anyway, by non-Jews, it certainly doesn't apply. Right? That, the impurity doesn't apply at all. Right? So it doesn't really matter. But if you tell me you're going to be Jewish, okay. So I answered that. Salvation comes from a place we least expected. Why is JC not an option? Why should it be an option? It's a false prophet. Absolute false prophet. Yeah. Also, it is true. Who we think the Messiah is going to be, we're probably going to be shocked who it is, but it ain't going to be him. It's going to be someone who fulfills the criteria. Right? It's going to be someone, first of all, you don't die in the process, but there's certain things you got to fulfill. He didn't fulfill any of them, according to us. He fulfilled nothing. So that's not an option. Right? Even a way out option, let's say, it comes out of nowhere, the Messiah comes, okay. But everyone's going to know. It's going to be clear, because of leadership, going to be a strong warrior, other things, okay. Yeah. But it's going to be clear. This is the one. It's not going to be someone who, doesn't fit the criteria. It's got to be someone, we can think out of the box. It can't be open-minded until your brains fall on the floor. But, at the same time, I would say we're not going to go, we're not going to be that far-fetched. Right? Yeah, it could come from someone where you don't expect it. It's not coming from a false prophet or any false prophet. Yeah, someone here asks, let's say, okay, back to prayer. Somebody asks if when an item is forgotten, forgotten or added. Yeah, and then you gulped, you realize you forgot, but you didn't swallow. Okay. Yeah, probably on its way down. Does one hawk it up? If it's a drink, you can't do that. If it's a drink, you just drink it. You can't push it to the side of your mouth. You won't, whatever. If it's already going down, that's it. It's going down. If it's something solid, you realize you didn't make a blessing. So if you can put it to the side of your mouth, as long as your mouth is not that full, you can make the blessing with it in the side of your mouth and then swallow. If that's not possible, it's already going down, there's nothing to do. There's nothing to do. The next bite you take, you make a blessing before. That's what you do. And you're right, it does happen. Yeah, if it hasn't gone down and it's a solid, you can put it, on the side of your mouth, in your cheek and make a blessing where it's not gross. Good. A liquid obviously can't do that, right? If not, it's already going down. You don't have to throw it up. Okay, so you ate it. You didn't make a blessing. Now what you're going to eat, you make a blessing on. That's what you would do. Someone here mentions, I can bring it here. Okay. There's a verse set of things say specifically expecting God will hear it. Yeah. Yeah, otherwise they consider coincidence. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what you're asking. You gotta realize one thing. I mentioned this. The other day. When somebody dies, in general, everyone's gonna die. When somebody dies, what's the reason that they die? The reason they die is God told the angel of death to take them in this way or that way or whatever it is. Yeah, that's why the person dies. Because God told the angel of death, the Satan, the evil inclination, whatever you want to call him. Now, a person will say, what do you mean? Person drowned. Person, died of car accident. Person died of cancer. Person died of, I don't know, fill in the blank. Died of any number of things. Died of a heart attack. Yeah, whatever it is. Whatever a person dies from, that's not the cause. The cause is because God took them. That's the reason. The fact that it happened this way or that way or whatever, okay. Yeah, but that's not the reason. Right? It's a sub reason, but it's not the reason. The reason the person dies is because God took them. How he took them, right? It doesn't really matter. Why do I say it doesn't matter? It's only the way we view it. Remember, a person will say if a child died young, or there are tragic ways to go, very tragic ways to go. And a person will say, oh, it's not right. Look what they did. They suffered this and that. Yeah. At the same time, someone could die, dementia, in their 90s. And okay, they had a good life, but it's very sad seeing them in the situation, and all that. There are different ways to view it, how we see it. But what's the bottom line? The bottom line is that's not they'll claim, the coroner will claim they died because of this. Okay. Yeah. But that's not why they died. They died because God took them. That's why they died. Yeah. When it came to COVID, if they had COVID in their system, they would say they died because of COVID. Now, it could be they did. Could very well be they did. Yeah. There are those that would say that the numbers were skewed. And that the claim is if they had COVID in the system, that's why they died. They could have died for any number of reasons. Just because they had COVID in their system doesn't mean 100% that's why they died. Yeah. But in our case, a person is going to die because that's what God wanted. That's what he wanted. And he wanted him to die in this way. Yeah, that's what he wanted. So the other reasons or quote unquote, things that the person goes through when they die, why they died, that's not the reason. It's the way we see it, yeah. died of a heart attack, died of cancer, died of this. Okay, but that's not the reason. The reason is because God took them. That's the reason. Why did he take them young? Why did he take them old? Good question. Rabbi would say people die young and old. Why? So people repent. If everyone died the same age, no one repents. Right? King David says Psalm 90, you only get 70 years. If you have strength, 80 years, anything over that's a bonus. So a person would die at 70. If everybody knew they were going to die at 70. Yeah? When would a person repent? Maybe a little bit before they're 70. Yeah, they said, oh, I got plenty of time. I got 20 years. I got 30 years. I got 15 years. Yeah? No one would ever repent. But also, there are a lot of things that happen in the world. You know, you can have earthquakes and other things happen in the world. Yeah, people can die from it. But it's also to shake us up. No pun intended. That's the whole purpose. To think you're not here forever, to repent. Not just because it's punishment, it's also punishment. No question, no such thing as a natural disaster. Who's in charge of the natural disaster? Who's in charge of nature? God. So they say, but why did he have to, wipe out half of Southeast Asia, make a tsunami and put Atlas back on the map? No pun intended. I don't know. Punishment, right? For sure, it's going to be punishment. Okay. But you can say they're innocent people. But we don't believe in innocent people. If it's a child that dies, good question. Can't be punishments, we always say. If they're under the age of 12 or 13 or under the age of 20. Yeah? Can't be punishment because they're not punishable. So it must be something their soul has to go through. Right? Otherwise you can say, yeah, it doesn't make sense. If God is all good, why does he do that? Good question. But a lot of things we see, we don't understand. Right? We don't understand. People give their spin on it. They'll say this, they'll say that. They don't have a clue. They absolutely do not have a clue. Yeah, doctors don't even know. A lot of things they do know, plenty of things they don't know. Right? They can say doctor does surgery, stitch the person up and say, okay, this is what should happen, whatever, and maybe it will, maybe it won't. They can't say for sure. Doctors don't have the ability to heal a wound on the inside. They can heal a flesh wound, as we would say. But on the inside, they do surgery, afterwards it can be complications. They could say, hey, according to statistics, it should happen because of the age of the person, the health of the person. They can estimate what's going to be, but they have no idea. They can't say for sure. So only on the flesh wound, on the outside, they can heal. On the inside, they'll stitch the person up and say, we've done everything we can. They can say, gotta be careful, there might be infection. You gotta be careful with this, careful with that. Okay. But can they say with certainty? No. They can't say with certainty. So they only have the ability to heal on the outside. Yeah. They can be very gifted, surgery and doing this and doing that, very good. But again, they're not healing the body. They're for sure not healing the body. Yeah, they'll stitch the body up. They might need antibiotics. They might need this. They might need that. Okay. But how the body heals on the inside, God heals it. That's it. Right? Many things could happen in between. Good things, God forbid, bad things. Right? They can predict based on a number of factors, but doesn't mean they're right. They could be right in some things. Okay. Guaranteed they got plenty of things wrong also. They'll say this should happen, that should happen. But they don't know. They don't know for sure. It's kind of like, not exactly, but a person takes certain medicine, and you look on the directions, and it say, what do the directions say? Could cause this, has like a whole list of side effects, potential side effects. Now, does that mean you're going to get any of them? No, not necessarily. But there are side effects. They have to cover themselves, or they don't want to get sued. There are certain side effects that can happen. Okay. Yeah. Now, maybe some people have them. Maybe some will never get any of them. Okay. Right. But like someone told me, a number of years ago, they were taking a certain whatever it was. I remember exactly what the pill was, what they had to take. And there were like 30 different side effects. None of them good. Yeah, heart attack, stroke, fainting, dizzy spell. I mean, like a whole list. But it's supposed to, it's supposed to help with, I forget what it was that they were taking it for, right? But they had to take it, right? They had to take it. But like, you I shouldn't laugh, but like, you look at the directions, and the directions say, well, it can cause all these different things. I want to take it? Do I have a choice? Well, you can take something else, but that, everything has side effects, right? The body is very fragile, very, very fragile. And a person could get some of the side effects. Yeah. Yeah. I know someone takes blood pressure medication a number of times, that they, change the dosage, other things because there were side effects. It said right on the thing, this could happen, that could happen. He got some of them. Yeah. So, they had to play with the medication a little bit just to, even things out. But like, yeah, it can help you in one way. Some medication help you one way and it causes other problems. But it's trying to take away the most important problem. Now, does that mean you're gonna have other side effects? It doesn't necessarily mean that. It could mean that, right? But again, the point is, if you look at what it is, or what possibly can happen, say, I'm taking this pill. We have to. You have no choice. Let's say you have no choice. You could have, but you could have these side effects. Okay. Yeah, I'm not gonna say a person's gonna die, but they have to take this. Yeah, but blood pressure medicine. Yeah, it's not a perfect science. They have to get the right dosage and whatever. But yeah, it can have tremendously negative effects. Oops. Yeah, let me see. Jesus was created by there. Who cares who he's created by? Why is he a false prophet? We don't believe in him. Whether he existed or not, is a whole other issue. Yeah, I'm not here to go through all the proofs why. There are a lot of reasons why. One of them is it didn't fulfill anything. It didn't, according to us, it didn't fulfill anything. So if it didn't fulfill anything, why is he a prophet? We don't even look at it as a prophet. It's a false prophet. Right? Right? We don't have anything. Yeah. What would it be like if I converted to Judaism? I don't know. It depends how you look at it. Live in a Jewish community, get a Jewish soul, make blessings all the time. Yeah, you got greater responsibility, right? You got to think about everything you do, the repercussions of everything you do, even for a non-Jew. Except, what non-Jews keep are universal laws, right? You live amongst the Jewish people, you have a community. I mean, whatever you have, there are high expectations. Greater modesty laws. You can't work on the Sabbath. I mean, a lot of things, right? A lot of things. Somebody says, Rabbi told me if I don't believe the oral Torah is divine, I don't have a place in Olam Haba. Do I agree? You got to believe in oral law, 100%, 100%. Both were given at Mount Sinai, and it makes sense why. I'm going to read this week's Parsha, Parsha Semor, chapter 23, book of Leviticus. You go through the holidays. So, you go through, a sukkah, right? Sukkah, 7 days, the Torah says. Yeah? Tell me what the definition of a sukkah is. How does it look? Does it have any walls? Does it have a roof? Torah doesn't tell me. Yeah, I have to bring a nice smelling fruit, a lulav, willows, and myrtle leaves. What's a nice smelling fruit? Torah doesn't tell me. You think it's a quince, someone thinks it's a pomegranate, someone thinks it's a I don't know, pineapple, watermelon, I don't know. But you have to bring it in front of God. Yeah, what if I bring the wrong one? What if I bring the wrong one? No one's going to think it's a lemon on steroids, right? And Ezra. So I have to bring it in front of God. What does that mean? And first of all, where do I bring it? And what is it? If I don't have oral law, you don't know what to do with anything, right? Another good example is tefillin, phylacteries, whatever you want to call them. The Torah says you got to put frontlets between your eyes. You have any idea what a frontlet is? The Torah calls it a totafot. Yeah, translated as frontlets. Okay, we understand it as tefillin. Totafot is not even a Hebrew word. Rashi says on the spot, it's an African word. How it got in there? Good question. Yeah, of course you need oral law, right? What's the question? Yeah, if you don't believe in oral law, you're Karaite. That's the problem. Yeah, that's one problem. The second problem, right? The second problem is that the claim is one second, that the oral Torah is divine, right? Right. So first of all, you have to believe in oral law. That is no question. That is no question. And we certainly believe oral law came at the same time. Yeah, came at the same time as giving the Torah. Now I would ask, for 38 years, there are 3 million people, let's say, in the desert. How long would it take Moshe Rabbeinu to teach 613 commandments? Let's say he had, I don't know, 1,000 people he taught. He taught the commandments. They're gonna teach everybody else, right? They're gonna teach the masses. Taught 10,000 people, 1,000 people, let's say. They're in the desert for 38 years, 40 years altogether. For 38 years, how long would that take? Estimate 5 years to teach them what the 613 commandments are. Basic ideas what the commandments are. 10 years? 15 years? Let's say I'll be generous. I'm in a generous mood. So let's say it would take 20 years. 20 years to teach them. What's he teaching the other 18 years? He has to be teaching something more in depth. It's not going to take that long unless the person's like, an absolute buffoon, right? And, he can't keep things in his head, right? It's not going to take that long to learn 613 commandments. Shouldn't take that long. So for 38 years, what's he teaching them? And what are the elders teaching them? You'll say Torah, very good. Yeah, but what's he teaching them? So Torah says 10 commandments, even before 10 commandments, you got to keep the laws of the Sabbath. If you don't get it right, death penalty, and you get spiritually cut off. What are the laws of the Sabbath? The Torah says explicitly, can't cook on the Sabbath, cannot carry or kindle a fire. Okay. So if that's the only 3, very good. And if there are more, so something missing. Right? There's something missing. So therefore, yeah, you need oral law. Not only you need oral law, but it comes from the Torah itself. It comes from the Torah itself. Someone here mentions, okay, kind of argument would be Jewish people are very diverse. So you have Ashkenazim, right? You have Sephardic people, very good, right? Coming mostly from this part of the world, the Middle East. Okay. Yeah. So what? Maybe the different sukkahs need to look different. How would you know that? How do you know what they're built from? These are basic questions the Torah doesn't answer. Torah is a law book. Torah just tells you, do this, don't do that. Right? Torah says don't steal. Yeah. What about from Uncle Sam? Non-legal loophole. Uncle Sam takes too much. Why isn't that stealing? Yeah. Or let's say a person was starving. Steals from the rich, Robin Hood, yeah. Stole money from the rich to go buy food for his family. He's gonna go in front of a rabbinical court. What's the rabbinical court gonna tell him? He's guilty. 100%, he's guilty. No, you don't understand. They were starving. They're this. The Torah needs definitions. The Torah has no definitions. The Torah is all about do this and don't do that, but doesn't tell me other cases. Right? It says don't murder. So you tell me, okay, that's premeditated. Okay. Right? Don't kill. What about in self-defense? Can you kill in self-defense? Where do you draw the line? How do you know where to draw the line? Right? How do you know where to draw the line? Over there. Right? What do I think about the black Israelites? Yeah, they claim to be the real Jews. Good luck. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah, we're not interested in answering Christianity here. What else? Maybe Torah's not meant to be something which is defined. But why would you get penalized? Answer me that. Why would you get penalized? If the Torah says don't do this and you're going to get seriously penalized, that wouldn't be fair if the Torah didn't tell you what to do. If the Torah doesn't give me definitions, then how can the Torah say you're going to get the serious punishment if you don't even know what it's talking about? That's kind of a problem. There are a lot of things, there are a number of things you get death penalty. Your death penalty was never given, right? But you can't give a death penalty if somebody doesn't know what it is. You say, oh, you'll figure it out. Maybe you figure it out. You're dead already, right? That wouldn't be fair. God has to be fair. So, yeah, it's a law book. I agree. It's a law book without any definitions. Yeah, it can't be meant to stay that way because then everyone's going to be doing their own thing. Some people will think, a sukkah looks like this. Someone will think it looks like a teepee. Someone thinks it's like an igloo. Someone thinks, I don't know, whatever it is. But how do they know they got it right? They say it doesn't matter. What do you mean it doesn't matter? Of course it matters. This is God's book. He passed it down to Moses. He gave it to us. You got to get it right. You can't not get it right. So how do you know what to do? Right? How in the world would you know what to do? Right? Think about the Sabbath is it needs to be holy. So anything that makes you unholy is not to do on the Sabbath. Okay, what's the definition of unholy? What's the definition? According to you, it means one thing. Is watching TV on the Sabbath unholy? Someone will say it depends what you watch. Yeah. If you watch a sporting event on the Sabbath, is that unholy? People say no. It's not unholy. It's beautiful. It's entertaining. Very good. Yeah. What again? People will say, I'm good. What's the definition of being good? What's the definition? You need definitions that are absolute, that don't change. Yeah. It needs to be explained. It's obvious it needs to be explained. Because a just, loving God is not going to punish people and not tell them how to do it. Why would he do it? Why would he give commands and not explain how to do it? Doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Over here. Somebody wants to say, I think maybe the Torah will punish you for not even trying. Why? Right? Why would that be? Why would that be? The Torah wants to give you a fair shot, but you have to know what to do. There's a lot of responsibility, right? And someone says, why does God have to be fair? Oh, that's a good question. Life is not what's fair, right? But see, we believe that there's God's going to punish measure for measure, and there is reward and punishment. That's one of the 13 principles of Maimonides, that God rewards and punishes, right? Again, what punishment depends on all kinds of things. Depends how you did it. Depends what your intention was, right? The Torah says God is just. So if the Torah says God is just, you're going to say, well, God, who says God has to be fair? Torah says it. He's got to be fair. But there are things we don't understand. Well, why do righteous people have it hard and evil people have it easy? That's a good question. Legitimate question. Yeah, there's things we don't understand. Could be any number of reasons why. Yeah. Somebody says, to laugh, but definition of unholy is when Torah talks about state of unholiness when a person making love to his wife. Why is that unholy? According to Torah, that if it's the right time, it's the greatest thing a person can do. Not just satisfy a person's urge, to draw them close, to make them one unit. Where is that unholy? If it's not used in the right way, yeah, it's not called unholy. It's called a lot of other things. It's called immoral. It's called many other things it's called. But who says it's unholy? That's not unholy. Certainly not a Jewish concept, right? That could be the holiest thing a person does. No question. Oh, Thunder points out, very good. Slaughters I have shown you. Nobody saw it. Good. So how do they know how to slaughter? Good. Yeah. Karaites are dying off. That's a big tell. You don't have a choice. Why are the Karaites dying off? Even if there are 50,000 of them in the world, why are they dying off? They don't have anything. Doesn't work. The only thing that's kept the Jewish people together is oral law. You go anywhere in the world, let's say in the 15th of Nisan, what do you have? 3 matzahs. You have 3 matzahs, 4 cups of wine, a cup for our lives and the prophets, universal, all over. You got bitter herbs or herbs, depending where you're from. Yeah. So you have one of 2 choices. You can be a Karaite, disappear from the earth, right? When's the last time Karaites ever did anything in the world? Right? We don't have, we don't really do much. We don't hear about them, so much, right? Or you have oral law. That's it. Or you'll take it into your own hands and do what your mind tells you to do, but you'll disappear also. You'll never be able to pass it down, right? That's what we want from Torah. We want to be able to pass it down. And the only people that can pass it down are people like us, Orthodox Jews. Reform and conservatives can't do it because they veer it off. They just do what they want when they feel like doing it. That's not Torah. It's not what the Torah says. Definitely not, it's definitely not what the Torah says. I'm talking about a verse that says, the person is alone, satisfying himself, or satisfies with a woman, is unholy for the entire day. He's unholy? Why? That's if he spilled seed. Okay, if he spilled seed, the question is, does he have to go to the mikveh? That's a different issue. But it doesn't mean he can't do it. It doesn't mean he can't do the act. The question is, after he's done, does he have to go to the mikveh? Does he have to purify himself? Doesn't mean the act is unholy. The act for sure is not unholy. Right? The question is, does he become impure afterward? That's a different issue. It doesn't mean the act itself. It has nothing to do with the act. Right? Let me see other questions here. That's my blood pressure. All right. Quince instead of an esrog. Yeah, quince, just keep in mind, if you eat quince, you got to, what do you call it? You have to boil it a lot and you have to add a lot of sugar. If you don't add a lot of sugar, it's very bitter. Found out this the hard way. Very, very bitter. Can't eat it. Right? You definitely can't eat it. Somebody asked, just in the plant's growth, like a spalier training, a bonsai type training allowed. I don't know if it's a problem, unless it's idolatry or some idolatrous thing. But if it's not grafting or things like that, then it should be all right. Right? I'll have to look into it. Not sure exactly what it is. Somebody says the measure of the minimum sukkah according to the law. It isn't huge rooms we put up these days. You're right. You're talking about a tiny place that barely, the smallest one would barely fit, a person in it. It would fit most of your body maybe in it. That'd be very uncomfortable. But that's the smallest one. Yeah, so people build bigger ones. Okay. It's not a limited, it's not a okay. If a person sat in a sukkah that was like the smallest one possible, okay. But you could build one that's like a mansion. If you wanted to. You could build one that's like, 30 meters, 50 meters. Some people have big sukkahs. Yeah, I got big families, whatever. But again, the Torah doesn't tell me. That's the point. So how would I know how to do it? How would I know how big, how small? Does it have a roof? Does it have real walls? Does it need real walls? Right? Doesn't tell me anything. 100% doesn't tell me anything. Right? So yeah, the Torah in general is a law book, but the Torah doesn't tell me how to do things. Right? That is exactly the point. So if the Torah doesn't tell me how to do things, how am I going to know how to do it? And how am I going to pass that down to a whole generation and future generations if everyone's doing their own thing? You can't make 2 Torahs. It's not if I feel like doing it or not. Where am I getting the information from? Right? Where am I getting the information from? Yeah. Leviticus chapter 15. Okay, let's see. Let's see what you're talking about here. Okay. Let me see. Chapter 15, 16 to 18. Okay, let's see. Torah says, a man who's discharged of semen shall immerse in the flesh of water. Let's go to the mikveh. Okay. A garment or anything else. Fine. Right? Now the question is, what's that talking about? Is it talking about where he has normal relations, or is it talking about spilling seed in general? Yeah. Seemingly, as a discharge of semen, has nothing to do with relations. It's talking about where he's not with a woman. If he's with a woman, it's a natural thing. Why would it be impure? That would be the question. Right? That would be the question. But it's not talking about that. Because why, again, in Torah logic, why would God make someone impure? If they're doing an act that's a proper act, wouldn't make them impure, right? Touch a dead body or dead animal, it's one thing. Yeah, but there it makes very clear, seminal discharge. I'm talking about being with a woman. What am I saying? Going to John New Testament. Okay. Someone asks, why would anybody watching a sport even overlord in Hashem's ways? Listen, there are some people that leave the TV set on, let's say Friday night, big game. They'll say, I didn't do anything wrong. They left the TV set on. Or it went on, let's say they turned it on with the what do you call it? A time switch. Time clock. Yeah. Now technically you didn't really do anything wrong. It's not your act. Right? But yeah, you'll say it's not in the spirit of Shabbat. It's good. 100%. Right? But technically, did you do anything wrong? No. It's not in the spirit, it's not in the spirit of Shabbos, but technically, you're just being disgusting in God's eyes, but technically you didn't do anything wrong. Right? And there are some people that will do this. I'm not saying the majority, more probably modern Orthodox Jews will do that. Big game 7, NBA Finals, their team's in it. Or even if not, they want to watch it. What's the problem? What's the problem? What they do wrong? Technically, they do anything wrong? No. You can't adjust the volume or change the channel. Okay, they leave it on one channel. Very good. Yeah, that's their enjoyment of Shabbos. Go explain to them why you can't do it. It's not in the spirit of Shabbos. Okay. You're right. There's a lot to be said about that, but it's not in the spirit of Shabbos, 100%. 100%. But technically, you didn't do anything wrong. But you're right. It's not going in God's ways. But technically, besides the fact that it's not in the spirit of Shabbos, it's hard to pinpoint what you did wrong. Especially if you didn't even put it on a time clock. Yeah, if you just left it on right before Shabbos, you leave it on this channel. Even if you don't have the volume on, even if you have the volume on, doesn't matter. Yeah, you left it on because you want to watch the game 3 hours later. Okay. Again, technically, is there anything wrong? It's not in the spirit of Shabbos. But did you break any Shabbos laws right now? No. It's just, not in the spirit of Shabbos, not a small thing. Just saying, but you didn't do anything wrong. Can a person, walk by a store? Let's say they go Shabbos day, they go for a walk. Yeah, they live in a place, there are stores nearby. Can they walk and window shop? Is there anything wrong with window shopping without going into the store? Technically, no. Again, it's not the spirit of Shabbos. Some people, you say they want to go to an art museum or whatever, they buy the ticket before they walk in. I don't know what to do with sensors and other things, but technically, could you do that? In theory, it's on the spirit of Shabbos, though, right? But let's say you get around all the problems. Yeah, you're walking there, you're not traveling, you're not carrying anything, whatever. You get in, you want to go, I don't know, you want to go to some art museum or whatever, some museum. What's the problem? Again, it's technical issue. Technically, you didn't do anything wrong. Spiritually, yeah, a lot of problems. A lot of problems. Yeah, it's not in the spirit of Shabbos. You get people. I know people very much, very much into soccer. Let's say Kador Regos, they call it here. Yeah, that like just can't give it up, so they leave it up. They don't want to miss it. Again, they'll say that's the way I enjoy shops. Okay, but it's a different issue. Um, um, yeah. Any other, any other question? One, again, keep in mind one thing, with all this, and that is that the whole point of Torah is to be able to pass it down to the next generation. Not just to keep it for yourself. That's true. You got to work on yourself. Give it over to your kids, family, whatever it is. But if you can't pass it down to the next generation, and many times in the Torah it says it's forever, forever, then there's something wrong if it can't get passed down. Now, the fact that 13.5 million Jews don't know anything about Torah, they don't, they can't read Hebrew or anything else. Yeah. Okay. And they split off into these other so-called groups. That doesn't work. How can you be part of a group that's 50, 60, 70% into marriage? But then again, I understand. There's an issue with oral law. People, some people have an issue with it, but you join it up with a group that's dead. If anyone hasn't told them, they're still dead. Even if there are 50,000 of them in the world, they don't do anything. They don't do anything. If it can't be passed down, I don't even want to hear an argument why it should be valid, because that's the whole point. Now you can say, well, look at all the Christians out there. How many really believe? They can have tens of thousands of followers. Okay, doesn't mean it's true. Certainly, you can say, well, they passed it down. What do they do? There's so many religious Christians out there. Some places, yes. Some places. Yeah. But again, it's not my job to disprove it. And the greater people than me can disprove it. I don't have any problem doing it, but like it's not my area of expertise. But if it doesn't work in general, then who cares? Right? You want to be able to pass it down. If you can't pass it down, that's criteria. Somebody here says spend centuries. Yeah, surviving the Karaites. Yeah, yeah. Again, where are they today? Is there a book written down with oral law? Yeah, it's called the Talmud. That's what it's called. 39 tractates. All about Shabbos, laws of festivals, about sacrifices, purity and impurity, spiritual cooties, I would call it. All the holidays, plenty. Yeah, plenty of tractates. That's all. That's the base. Everything else, get Rashi, Tosfos, get all the commentators, early commentators, later commentators. How it's codified in Jewish law, plenty. Yeah, plenty, but that's the base. Right? That is the base. The Mishnah is a commentary on the Torah. Gemara is a commentary on the Mishnah. The Mishnah and the Gemara make up the Talmud. That's what it is. But again, these other things, when it comes to the Karaites or any other group, where where are they today? That's what you got to ask. Maybe they've been persecuted, maybe this, maybe, but where are they? Where are they? You got to pass it down. It should be flourishing, right? And only by us, Torah is flourishing because in the Orthodox community, every other Jewish community, i.e., Reformed, Conservative, whatever you want to call them, they're all dying. I mean, they're all dead pretty much. They haven't been buried yet, but they're all, all the movements are dying. You can't succeed if you have 60, 70% into marriage. It's a disaster. Disaster. So, someone can show any great things the Karaites have done over the last, 150, 200 years, like we're on it. Right? That's my very simple, argument. Could be they brought some interesting things to the world. Okay, so what? If they're a fossil, guess what? They're a fossil. If they're a fossil, it's over. It doesn't matter. Right? It doesn't matter what no matter what they bring to the table. They're a fossil. They don't exist. As if they don't exist. I don't care if they're 50,000. Right? Even if they're 50,000, they still don't exist. They still don't exist. Maybe they have communities, different places. I don't know. Never seen them, never heard of them. Not making any waves. That's the point. Do I get many no the Rabbi Singer's extricated from Christianity? I do get people that want to convert that came out of him, that came from him. Do I get Noahide sometimes? Yeah. Yeah. Usually Noahide look at his stuff also. It's the vast majority, I'm not sure, but it's a mixture. Definitely a mixture. Yeah, and by the way, not a lot of people when they have this thing with Christianity, they look at his stuff. He's got very good stuff, no question. So like, then they'll be either want to stay in Noahide or they'll want to convert. Right. But most people before they look at his stuff have to believe 100% JC's not the Messiah. Or they have serious doubts that he's the Messiah. Right? Because again, there's a big problem because they don't want to fry in hell forever. So like they don't want to give him up. So that makes sense. But he'll be the last stop because they don't want to they don't want to give that up. But Rabbi Skobach, look at his stuff, and he's in Toronto. Yeah. So a lot of people go through him because he's got all this great information. But yeah, have I got a number of people? Something sure. Yeah. But again, he's the last stop because if you're going to fry in hell forever, it's very good deterrent. If you're going to fry in hell forever, well, you better be sure. You better be sure you believe in him because if not, you're not going to be able to look at the other information because you're still afraid. It's a good fear factor, right? You're still afraid because you don't want to fry in hell forever. Okay. You have that fear factor. Good. But people will only go to him and look at his information if they either if they want to prove him wrong. It's one thing. Or they want to they want to see what he has to say. See if it makes sense. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, I'm gonna stop here. I do this every Tuesday and Thursday, 10 o'clock Eastern time, 5 o'clock Israel time. Anyone has any questions? Feel free. You can find me on Facebook at Mark Chaim Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, orthodoxconversion.com. Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There I get videos and Q&As, as it's our fathers. Book of Leviticus, you want to send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com. RBVI.